Yulia Sion. I'm a researcher and industry expert in haptics and wearable technology, and I will be hosting today's episode. Today, we will talk about media storytelling and the role of mediated touch in enhancing media experiences. My guest today is Izabela Derda. Izabela is an assistant professor in media and creative industry at the Media and Communication Department at Erasmus University Rotterdam. Her research interests are around experience design and media production practices for storytelling. She is also a multi-award-winning media producer, advertising expert, and a speaker. She has spoken on numerous panels and has sat on juries for major advertising festivals around the world. For instance, Cannes Lions, Crystal Festival, Eurobest Clios Awards, and many more. Hi, Izabela. Thank you for your time. Yes, thanks for your time, for taking this time to chat with me today. How are you? Hope you're enjoying the spring.
Yes, thank you very much. All good. I hope you're also fine.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited about this talk because we haven't guests actually talking about storytelling. So I'm very excited about this area and how haptics are somehow related, also could be related to this. And maybe to start with, if you don't mind, you could talk a bit about your research interests, right, within media and storytelling, and how did you become interested in this field?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So what I do with my research is I explore how emerging technologies reshape co-creative processes in creative industries, how it affects stories that the creative industries are telling, but also how the technologies do change the dynamics of creative processes. So it does not only affect what the industries offer to the audiences and how it's delivered, how it's experienced, but also it changes very much how we do create content and how we do create experiences for the audiences. So as a package, this is very much at the core of my interests. And as a research topic, it is very interesting for me because from my early background, I'm a film and TV producer. So I was very much a practitioner before I turned to more towards academia side. So I'm very much still interested in how it looks from inside, how we enhance those, and how we can make the best use of the technologies to offer the most satisfying experiences for the audiences.
That's really nice. So you have like a kind of like a back end, front end experiences, right, and around media and storytelling. I wonder, from your observations, from all this experience that you have from different angles, right, practical, like research, etc., what current changes in media storytelling do you observe at the moment, and what other developments do you kind of foresee maybe in the next 20 years or so that could await us?
I think this is a bit difficult to talk about media trends at large if we think about the entire breadth of creative industries. But there are indeed some patterns. If we, for example, take a look at advertising and museums experiences, surprisingly, they have quite a lot in common because there was at some point a big shift from being very much focused on offering information, being persuasive, and offering a lot of content that is there to inform and educate, to the fact that we tell stories, right? Suddenly, all the advertisers, all the brands started telling us the stories. There was this urge that it had to be storytelling driven. And the same shift happened actually in the museums. From offering a lot of information, museums started to think and acknowledge that people are getting more engaged and more interested in the content if they are seeing the bigger story that is behind the exhibition. Then we started seeing this shift that, okay, we have storytelling, but there is experience economy, right? So we want to experience things that experiencing with more than just having a story, experiencing multiple senses becoming important. And there was a big hype on technologies and how technologies can help us being immersed in those experiences. And I think we are getting now into this phase that technology cannot be means on its own it needs to serve a purpose, right? So it's a balancing moment when technology serves the purpose, but we don't focus on the technology itself. So I think we are coming to this realization that we use technology when it's needed, but it does not necessarily have to drive the experience, right? So it's a great addition, it's a great way to support the experience, but we also need to be smart in a way we use it. So, for example, we don't distract audiences from the main storyline only because we are eager to use those technologies. So I think that's an important trend, and we will start seeing this more and more. And I think the other thing is that because, of course, we are in the time of booming of generative AI, I think we will get to the point when we will start appreciate human art more. So I think what happened, for example, with ceramics, you can buy any kind of ceramics that is produced by machine, but we still like to bring from our trip abroad this nice cup that is handmade. And it's important for us that it's handmade. And I think the same may happen soon with art or photography. You can generate basically anything with AI now, but I think we will soon start appreciating the fact that something is human made. And I foresee this as a trend that is to come. And as I spoke to some professors at art schools, they start already seeing this, that people are actually asking for this art that is human made when we see this rise of AI generated content.
Yeah, it's very interesting how that you mentioned that it's some sort of a comeback, right, to originality, right? I was talking about this with a friend of mine. I was thinking like now we have the products, made in some country, right? Made there. Now we could have products as made by human. Possibly, right? But I see. But do you think it's going to be a major comeback, or it's going to be more like a special thing now, coming back to appreciating or is it's going to be a mainstream comeback?
Well, I think those things will go in parallel, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
same as, yeah, as I said, with ceramics, right? Like there is a lot of people who now go to ceramics workshop because they want to do something with their hands, right? Also, pandemic did show us that we appreciate being creative, especially if we are stressed and under pressure. We appreciate and we handle better difficult situations if we engage with creative acts. So I think those two things will go shoulder to shoulder because, of course, AI generated content will be always cheaper to produce. If we think, for example, about illustrations for newspapers and magazines or even blogs online, because it takes time and effort of human being to create something by hand. So of course this will come with the higher price tag, but there will be those places to which we will be going to actually get this quality content. So I think one will not kill the other, and those two will exist in parallel.
I see, makes sense. So just to summarize, so the trend is that we want to try to balance out the number of technologies we use, right, for immersive experiences. And it's actually links well to my next kind of topic of conversation around your research and work done with the museums, right, and interactive exhibitions and in the real, in that space, right, space of exhibiting things to the public. And I noticed that trend. I'm based in Estonia, and here they have this big push on technology. So every museum nowadays would like to have some technology in the space of the exhibition. But the main problem with that is it's too much, and it's mostly a screen-based interaction, right? So you have some objects, right? And you can explore it further by interacting with a screen. So I wonder if there is any change, not only in the amount of technology used for such interactive experiences within the museum realm, but also type of technology. For instance, are there any aspects of integrating haptic technology in immersive exhibitions? And I know you worked with in that particular direction. Maybe you can talk about it as well.
Yes, of course. I think that we have two topics here. On the one hand, when we use technologies within the museum experience, it needs to, as we said, enhance the storytelling, right? And it needs to be seamless for the audiences. And what we see quite a lot in exhibition spaces nowadays is that institutions very often still struggle on how to incorporate technologies within the experience. As you said, there is a lot of screens, there is some interaction of human and screens. However, you can also see quite a lot of QR codes. And if you actually see this as a part of the experience, you follow the exhibition, and then there is the QR code, where very often you don't really have a clear reason of why you should actually scan it. So audiences very often, visitors very often are not really given a very clear reason of, okay, why actually I should scan this QR code. And also, it takes actually quite a lot for a visitor to make this decision. Okay, I will take my phone out of my pocket or my purse. I will scan, I will go to this website, and then maybe I will have to log in or download the app. So there's really a lot of steps for me to take before I actually can experience something. So there needs to be a really big value behind it for me to decide to take all those steps. So it's very important actually as a first step to think how we can make the experience smooth for the visitors and avoid this kind of hiccups. If we ask audiences to use their own devices, there is always a bit of a barrier, right? That there is an effort that is perceived by the audiences. On average, we spend 8 seconds by artwork. So if it takes like 7 minutes for me to wait for VR goggles, a lot of people will not wait. That's a big thing to ask for. So the first thing is, what is really the role of technology within the experience? What added value does it offer us? That's a very important one, right? Can we do this without? If we decide that we want to incorporate technology, what is really the reason? And what is the extra value that we give to the audiences? And when it comes to engaging other senses within the museum space, I don't think it's a case of technology or if and what kind of technologies should be used, but I think it's another take on how we understand human experience and human interaction, because as human beings, we don't experience the world only with sight and sound. But very often when we are offered experiences, we are only engaged through actually what we can see and what we can hear. So the important shift or the important thing that should be considered when the experience is designed is to consider the fact that as a human being, we experience the world with all our senses. And it's amazing to observe toddlers if they are offered with a new object, right? Kids would probably experience the object with all their senses, right? They would take a look at it. They will probably try to see if it can make any sound. They would put that in their mouth. They will check the texture with their hands, right? As human beings, that's natural for us to engage with the world with all the senses. And for example, if we enter a museum, we enter the room and we feel temperature through our skin. For example, it's hot outside and we are entering a room where it's air conditioning. We feel the difference. We automatically feel through our senses that the room feels different. The room probably smells different than the outside. And we hear also sounds that were not only designed within the exhibitions, but we may hear the street outside. So what is important, in my opinion, to consider when we design experiences is to consider that as human beings, we engage with a lot of senses. And then in a natural way, when we engage more senses, we are more focused, and the educational value is also higher because we are more focused. So our engagement translates to how much invested and immersed we can be in something that we are doing. So Technology
Right.
can help us achieve that, but I think the first step is actually acknowledging the fact that we experience with more than just seeing and hearing.
Do you observe that practitioners currently do not fully acknowledge that fact?
Well, my experience with museum experts is that some of them do, and that is also visible in the way they design activities within the museums with little games that you can play. Even if they are offline, you can play a little board game, you can engage through multiple types of activities. But I think we tend to forget because it's so natural for us to feel the temperature, to hear background noise. We take for granted a lot of those. And what I like to do with museum experts is, for example, to ask them to experience the room in the gallery, in their museum, with their eyes closed, for example, because then you start triggering all the other senses. You start trying to feel the room in a little bit different way, right? If we impair one sense, other senses become stronger. So I think it's a great exercise actually for us to see how we experience the world in a little bit broader spectrum than just focusing on seeing things.
That's a very interesting technique to embed actually in the design practices and co-design methods. I was wondering, yes, we do not fully acknowledge it's one point, right? But then on the other hand, lots of exhibitions, right? They're limited by what they can be touched, I assume, right? Or smelled, right? So, but if we talk about haptics, right, that's like focus on that. For instance, we have certain limitation to what we can touch actually. And
yes, but on the other hand, there are also interesting ways to go around this. So, for example,
that's what I wanted to ask you.
3D print the objects that you couldn't normally touch, right? So it gives you an opportunity to either, for example, see something in augmented reality or actually touch physically if you 3D print a copy of the object, right? So it gives you a possibility to see how people were using the object in the past, for example, without harming the object that is within the exhibition.
Are there, yeah, that's what I wanted to expand a bit. Any other ways, let's say, to augment the experience beyond, let's say, this is one way to help, basically to literally bring the original object into vicinity of hands, right, of a visitor. Anything else we could use haptic to enhance the experience, maybe bring some novel experiences beyond touching the original object?
Well, it depends what is the purpose that we want to achieve, right? I think, again, the purpose should come first, because if we think about expanding our reality through augmented reality or virtual reality, the opportunities are endless, right? We could feel that temperature change through the haptic suits or the haptic gloves. We could operate with a lot of different technologies. The question is why we want to use them and what we want to achieve. So why we want to transport our audiences elsewhere and what effect do we want to achieve? What is the addition to the story that we can get when we use them?
That's always an overarching question. It's like the overarching research question. What do we want to achieve? What is the purpose? Right. Okay, so maybe we can move to this other angle of your research within cinematic virtual reality experiences, because I found quite a bit of interesting angles there. But to start with, again, I would like to just briefly discuss what you've done within the cinematic virtual reality area and how haptic feedback could possibly enhance the audience sense of presence and immersion compared to traditional filmmaking techniques.
CVR is, of course, a very niche field, both in cinematography and VR. But there is a lot of learnings from video games, for example, that can be taken to cinematography. So together with my team, we try to explore that also as a field of research. And when we think about cinematography and CVR more specifically, an important thing for us for the feeling of presence is the feeling of realness. So, of course, experiencing with multiple senses again is more natural for us as human beings, right? If we are within the situation, if we are surrounded with the world, it's natural for us to be able to touch things, to grab things, to be able to use our hands in a natural way, not only with controllers, right? So, for example, the use of haptic gloves allow us to use our hands more naturally than, for example, with traditional VR controllers. So that's the first thing that we feel more natural than in a traditional VR situation. Or if we are thinking about traditional movie, we don't experience that at all, right? We transport ourselves through the story, but not necessarily get physically immersed within the experience. So for sure, that's one of the things that can enhance the presence. However, this experience of realness, the need of experience of realness, can also be a barrier for us for experiences, right? Because at the current state of art of hardware, very often it's difficult for us to feel our hands, for example, in a natural way, because the gloves have their weight, for example, and we don't really feel like our hands are necessarily our own. The way that haptic feedback that we can program affecting our body does not necessarily always feel very natural, right? In a sense that we experience vibration instead of real touch. If somebody pats us on our shoulder, we may feel a vibration. That's not how we would experience that in our real life. The purpose for the story will be served, but it can potentially even take us out of this feeling of immersion because we might feel disconnected. We will start acknowledging, okay, this is not how I feel in my real life. What is happening? What should I do? How should I react? Because our body will not react in a natural way. That's not how we feel in our everyday life. So it offers a lot of opportunities, but also we need to be aware of the limitations that there are still there. So it's a balance.
Right, there is quite a bit of limitations still in terms of form factor, right? You mentioned the gloves and also, of course, the actuation technology itself. And if we talk about vibration, yeah, it's one of the easiest actuation type to embed into wearable forms, but also the least natural one, right? In terms of sensation, the tactile sensation that it produces. And I read somewhere a research article that one way to approach this would be actually to create a new language, right? It's not about creating natural sensation, it's about creating something new that is compelling enough to exist. And that could enhance as well the immersive experiences. It's just going to be something very new.
Yes, and I think there are a few ways, right, of how we can approach it, because you can try to take those vibrations quite literally. So how we can use those so they feel natural. So let's say there is a rumble somewhere and we physically feel it, and it's natural because that's something that we may also experience in real life, that kind of, okay, the world shakes, there is earthquake, there are, yeah, the bomb was outside our window and we feel physically the vibration, and that's a natural way.
Right.
But also there are also other cases where we experience this kind of vibration. This is listening to music very loud. So music is one of those languages where we are able to translate those vibrations to this new language. So we were experimenting with translating various musical instruments to the feelings of a person and how it can be understood depending on how the vest or the suit would vibrate. However, at this point, we experience quite a lot of issues with latency. So playing music with VR is still very difficult to get that in sync. So to actually have things perfectly synchronized is still a little bit of an obstacle, at least was an obstacle for us. But that's definitely a very interesting case to explore, to see how kind of vibration that is generated from music and can be understood for a person, if it's a potential or this is a starting point for generating this kind of language.
And when you talk about understood from the perspective of the type of music, or what kind of, let's say, affective states it produces or tries to communicate?
We were experimenting with emotions, so trying to deduct what kind of vibe, what kind of emotion, what kind of emotional state we are trying to translate. So it was very early stages research, but I think it's an interesting avenue to explore further.
It certainly is. Actually, I was doing some of my studies actually, but in a very controlled environment, not in VR. Basically, we were trying to take certain sounds that were evaluated before in terms of their emotional resonance, and then we would translate those sounds into haptics, right? So basically, they were felt haptically. And we noticed, actually statistically significant, that these sounds, when felt as tactile sensations, produce very similar affective states. So there is certainly a potential. And I think it makes sense because vibration and sound, they're in the same region, right? Also how our brain, interprets it. The regions of the brain, they're very in a close connection to each other, and they're neighbors.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it
So that's
is
definitely
very interesting area to explore further. All right, so there is another thing I wanted to discuss a bit on cinematic virtual reality in terms of more functional approach towards haptic design, so haptic technology. So, and it's actually would be nice also to have like a definition of cinematic virtual reality, maybe from your perspective. But as I understand, one of the aspects of such experiences that you are in a 360-degree perspective, right? And if you do so, there is a possibility to miss out something, right? There could be a fetch feeling. Let's say I'm looking ahead of me, I might be missing something behind. And from one of your papers, there was an aspect about using haptics as cues to basically direct attention. Could you talk a bit about that? Was it successful to use such cues or not?
Yes, of course. So what we discovered, that if you think about those movies that are experienced through 360, which basically means indeed that you can turn around and experience various scenes within your own environment. So for example, you're at the party and a lot of things are happening. So in one corner you can observe, I don't know, a little cat playing with a piece of paper. You turn around, you see a couple fighting, so you start, a bit listening to what's happening there. What we discovered is that people start feeling FOMO in 360, because there are things that you might be missing out by being turned into wrong direction, and that it's difficult to actually bring people to the scene to which we would like to, by just the way that the world itself is designed. So we experimented with delicate vibrations that would direct people to the scene that we would like them to explore at this very moment, so they don't miss out on an important plot element that is happening in the particular part of the environment. However, as we tested that, we realized that there is really no difference for people if this is a vibration or this is natural sound that could occur within the scene, or it could be, for example, brighter light within their eyesight, while light and sound felt more natural for people. So even though haptics may serve as a tool, probably this is not the most natural way that we would like to experience that through which we would like to experience that as the audiences, right? Because if something happens in the other part of our house, we experience that because probably we hear somebody shouting, or we heard that something that fell down, not because we have this weird feeling, right? Again, if it's loud music, yes, it might be that we start feeling the vibration, but probably it would go together with the sound that we are hearing. So haptics is not always the most natural way, but if we think about haptics beyond just vibration and we start playing with temperature, this could be actually an interesting way to use it. So we are in the scene and we suddenly feel cold on our right arm, and we turn to the direction of, okay, where this weird sensation is coming from. Oh, somebody
Mhm.
opened the window and it's very cold outside, right? So if we go beyond the vibrations and we start being more playful with what we can feel and how we can use haptics, I think then it becomes more interesting. But we would have to go beyond this a bit weird vibration feeling because it does not always feel natural for us.
Yeah, I feel like we just got stuck in vibration because it's the easiest way to start playing with haptics. But when we talk about haptics, it's not only vibration, right? It's actually force feedback, temperature, I don't know, anything that you can imagine. It's really, or shape alloys or things like that. So there are lots of kind of actuation techniques, but they're so difficult to integrate, especially in variable forms, that we always speak vibration. And for vibration is a very quite a narrow function, right? If the goal is to simulate some natural touch, right, as you talk, as just mentioned about it.
Yeah, I think it's also
Um,
linked to the availability of hardware, right? Because of gaming in gaming rooms, those haptic vests that vibrate became quite easily accessible. And when you want to play with temperature or more advanced haptic feedback, then you need more advanced hardware, which is, of course, more expensive, less accessible, very often only limited to very specialized professional fields where they build those kind of hardware specifically for their needs, right? If we take a look at those suits that are, for example, being used for firemen training, right? So they can train in a very high temperature without being actually exposed to the actual fire. So there is plenty of those kind of applications, but it's not as accessible as the vest. So that's usually the first go-to, also because of high level of adoption because of video games.
correct, correct. All right, so I think we, in this kind of discussion, I think we even covered the topic on the challenges of integrating haptics, right? We can summarize it as a form factor, right? And actuation techniques are limited due to different reasons, resources, or again, form, right, for integration into variable forms. And then the other question, maybe I would like to discuss briefly, just to kind of finalize our podcast, is about design methodology. You mentioned that you are working together with curators or people who work in the museums, right? And you try to co-design things with them. And one technique, for instance, you mentioned, which was very interesting, is to basically walk or experience the room blindfolded, right? So could you share any other practices or experiences working with people in the field? Let's say we could take a museum, right, or any other immersive experiences. How do you approach so that they get out of regular way of thinking about the exhibition or the experiences that they create, improve them?
I think that there are a few things that today's reality, when we think about co-designing experiences that actually occur, first is that it's no longer possible to build those experiences having only your own team within the institution. So those teams, you can clearly see, become a combination of people coming from different fields. And I think it's a great thing that people start challenging each other's thinking, and it can be very inspiring to have in one room people coming from different disciplines. And I think we'll start seeing this even more and more, that people will have to sit together in one room and will together think, okay, how actually we can bring those experiences forward the best way. And I think that's the, again, most important thing with building experiences, that you can see very often that if you bring tech people to the table, people are very excited to incorporate specific element of technology. And we sometimes forget the higher purpose, right? So again, thinking about the value and challenging those moments when we are tempted to use specific kind of tools. And it doesn't have to be technology, it can be written text. But what is actually the reason why at this very moment that will improve the clarity or the flow of the story, and how we can offer the most seamless and most satisfying experience for the audiences. The other thing is that we need to balance those moments of high engagement with those moments when the audiences can actually have a little bit of less intense experience and get some rest. Because if we think about going through the experience, it could be in a museum exhibition. If every room that we enter is incredibly intense, we will be tired after 10, 20 minutes because we are so bombarded through multiple senses. So another thing is to consider how much we can take as human beings, to consider, for example, neurodiversity. I think that's another trend that is coming, that we will start acknowledging more and more, that we have different levels of sensitivity to those triggers that are surrounding us. So if there is a moment within the exhibition or within any experience that is super intense, there needs to be a moment when we can take few deeper breaths to go to something exciting again. Because otherwise we get overstimulated and we will not make through entire exhibition. We will quit because we will be overstimulated and we will feel exhausted. So that's another thing that I really like to do with the people I work with, is to think what is not only the storyline, but what is the arc of engagement and emotions that we want visitor to go, because you cannot keep your audiences only at this highest level of engagement, because
right. So good point.
will get tired, because we will stop being focused, because we got too much to swallow. So that's another very important thing. So I would say consider that the fact that we as human beings engage with all the senses and not only focus on things that we can see and hear, but also that we have a certain level of what we can take. And it's important to differentiate that across the experience path.
Maybe at some point there will be also an option for customization of experience, but I guess that's going to be a next level, right? So you can choose what kind of experience or level of intensity you want to be immersed in.
Yes, but on the other hand, we already know that if experience becomes highly personalized, people start feeling FOMO. It's the same as if you think about your Netflix feed, you question what recommendations you're not getting. So you start wondering what I'm missing out within the experience by the fact that this is personalized. So what some museums already do is that they have few different kind of paths, and they are designed for multiple visits. So this time we will take you through this path that will focus on specific kind of sensation or a specific topic. So it will be not necessarily very personalized to yourself, but maybe to your taste. But on the other hand, you know by design what you're missing out. And you feel like, okay, today I'm not into modern art, and I usually am, but today I'm actually interested to see something that I usually don't consume. There is another path. So this is the path of the things you would not get in your recommendation because that's not what you're typically recommended. So our streaming platforms algorithms, it works similarly to other kinds of experiences, that we experience the same kind of FOMO.
Exactly. It gets back to your first point that you did in the beginning, that advertising is very much similar to this immersive experience and storytelling itself. It's right? This is what you mentioned.
Yes.
So it's somehow connected, I feel. Well, unfortunately, we have to finish. I wish we could talk more because it's a massive, massive topic for conversation. Storytelling, we humans love stories. And there is so much that can be done around storytelling in all kinds of different fields, not just museums or VR experiences. So maybe at some point you can come and visit us and this podcast again. And we can chat from a different angle. And I really, really appreciate your time and trying to cover as much as we could today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was very, very interesting.
Thank you.